Hello, everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm artist Elizabeth Whelan, and I work on Chappaquiddick Island up in Massachusetts. It's evening in November, which is why it's so dark in here right now. But I wanted to record this video for you. I did an in-person class earlier this week, the first of two, on using drawing as a springboard for experimentation. And I wanted to make sure that you had the information as well. So let's get started. And first, let me tell you, we had very simple materials that we were using in this class because it's all about exercises and kind of starting to think about how to use drawing for experimentation. So the tools we were using were really simple. An ebony pencil, a Prismacolor ebony pencil, which is one of my favorite darker pencils to use. And I didn't want to use a lighter pencil because I wanted to have the range. An ebony pencil has a lot of range. You can either use it really lightly to get, some very nice light tones, light values, or you can go really dark and get some nice darks as well. And then drawing stumps, just regular paper drawing stumps. They're gray, inexpensive. They're good for blending. I don't like overusing them, as anyone who's listened to my videos knows. But if you want to get some, quick shading going, on the lower layers of your drawing, they're fabulous. And then last but not least, a kneaded rubber eraser. And so a kneaded rubber eraser comes looking like this, but then, I'm going to open up my little pencil case. After you've been using it for a while, it looks more like this. And when it gets dirty, what you do to clean it is you just pull it like this, and then you get nice clean eraser. So what I like about it is you can also form it into different shapes. So if you want to erase, lines, or if you want to, kind of stump it down on your drawing and get, different textures, you can do that. So we were just using those simple tools. And then if you look below this video, I've got links to a PDF that's up on my website, and you can go to my website, which is elizabethwhelan.com, to the art classes page, and all the downloads that go with all the videos are listed there. So what is in the PDF is some of the stuff that we used for the exercises. So there's one page that looks like this that has a bunch of Mexican masks on it. There's one page with a larger Mexican mask, and then one page with this fabulous Japanese mask on it. And so I'll explain as we go through what that is all about. So for this class, I'm starting off just by kind of running through all of the information and also talking about how you can do each exercise as you go. And then you can take your own time to work with the worksheets if you want to download those, or you can just draw the masks. You can pause the video and actually look at them right there on the screen and do it. You don't have to actually have these exercise sheets if you don't want. I just did that for the class to kind of get things moving quickly. And so there will be a part 2 video that'll be uploaded next week where we talk about also using drawing as a springboard for experimentation, but instead of objects like masks, landscapes, large vistas, buildings and scenes in cities. How on earth do you start dealing with that and then break it down to the point of using it to experiment? So here we go. Okay, so experimentation, what is it? So I used to think it was just goofing around with art supplies, and I found it really unrewarding actually. I'd bring home something, I thought it would be cool. I didn't really know how to use it. I tried to apply whatever it was the way that I, did some other type of art, and I wasn't getting enough out of the whole thing. And I used to think that's what experimenting was, and I didn't like it. And it wasn't until, as I started painting more and I realized I wanted to try new things, I was like, oh, so experimenting doesn't have to be like just, this sort of free-for-all of art supplies or whatever. It actually can be a thought-out iterative process or doing something logical. And then as you get started, you start to, you do get free form. One idea leads to another and this, that, and the other, but you can start off with a plan. In painting, you could just substitute one type of yellow for another. I'm going to use Naples yellow, instead of cadmium yellow this time or something like that. And drawing is such a really good way to free yourself up. You might have an idea of something you saw, an idea you have, we have a tendency, to go and take a picture with a camera, and it just doesn't seem to live up to this idea in our heads. And then if we use that as the jumping off point, for our painting or whatever, the whole thing falls short before we've even started. So actually coming up with a drawing, a sketch that more closely resembles your idea. Now, I don't mean like in terms of detail or technique or anything like that. I just mean in terms maybe of composition or placement or what the elements are that are going to go into it. And then figuring out, hey, can I make some changes? Can I do something interesting with this? So it's often iterative. We're often drawing the same thing over and over again until, we're trying this, we try that, until we get to some sort of conclusion. And it's nice to have a few tools that you can use to try to sort of start this process off. They're really simple things that I'm going to be showing you. But once you kind of get in the hang of it, you're like, oh, okay, I can try this, and then I can try that. And it starts you off on a journey. So why bother to experiment at all? Often artists find themselves in a comfortable rut. They're doing work that they're getting a lot of accolades. People are saying nice things about it. Maybe you're selling in a gallery, and you're maybe a little concerned and afraid about actually, mixing things up. Will the gallery still want your work? Will people still like it? But you really do have to experiment and stay curious, because those new things that you pick up during the course of this, you're probably still going to gravitate right back to the type of art that you like to do. But now you're bringing in some other ideas, some other thoughts, other techniques, and it's really a must do. So why am I qualified to talk about this? So I was really comfortable with my portrait practice, but I wanted to expand, my own artistic ideas. I was trying to paint different things, and I was enjoying it. But I just didn't really, just painting stuff wasn't really doing it for me. And then all of a sudden I had this idea, for a potential body of work that would allow me to express some things I'd really been thinking about the natural world. And I knew it would just be the start of something that I would probably be painting for years. But you have to start somewhere, right? And in the course of doing like the little sketches and stuff to figure out what I was going to do and maybe how these paintings were going to look, I also decided I was going to move them either to different levels of finish, or I was actually going to try different styles, abstraction, very detailed realism, whatever it happened to be, in terms of what I thought suited the subject matter. And it was so much fun, and I learned so much, and I loved the way the paintings came out. And so this is another reason why I wanted to tell you all about this. So I'm the director of the Martha's Vineyard Drawing Prize, which is a drawing competition that's just been in its 5th year. And when I see some of this beautiful work that comes in from a drawing point of view, I mean, this stuff is really well finished and highly conceptualized. And you can go to www.mvdrawingprize.com to see, the finalists. Also, there's an Instagram channel you can go and check out. But I decided that, these possibilities were fantastic, but if I always thought about drawing at that level, then once again, I wouldn't experiment. I'd be trying to get, to this finish or that finish. How to back it all down to something a lot rougher. So whether I was trying to get to a wonderful finished drawing or a wonderful finished painting, I could be as free as some of these different artists I was seeing on what they were producing. So I'm a painter who likes to sketch, and I have made a habit of starting off my paintings with drawings rather than starting off the paintings with necessarily a photograph. Now I may have photo reference that I'm using, and if I do, sometimes I'll sit down with, put the picture up on a screen and sit back with my sketchbook and try to remember what it was that captured me in the first place when I took that photo. Because the photo flattens everything out, the color isn't right, it distorts, and I want instead a feeling to come out, not a forensic reproduction of a particular photograph. So this is the kind of thing that I'd like to see, you be able to incorporate in your artistic practice as well. So here's an example: Merry Thistles. I wanted to do thistles, right? I didn't have thistles without a background. I had lots of pictures of thistles, in various different areas. And I decided to try a few different things. I wanted to, just like this one, drop the background out completely. Then I wanted to do somewhere, there was dark around the edges, but light in the middle. And then somewhere there were these silhouettes, like you see here. And as I went along, I got sketchier and sketchier. I was on a roll. I'm doing all of these paintings. There is a show deadline too that I have to meet. And it was really freeing to be able to do these kinds of sketches and think things through. And then when I ran into trouble in a painting, or if I got to a point where I'm like, okay, how far do I take this? I looked back at my sketch to see what was going on. Now, these kinds of thumbnails are things I've done because I have developed different exercises for myself over time. So I might do this, I might do other types of sketching as well, but I just wanted to show you, you don't have to start from a degree of finish. You can start from something really simple like this, or you can do something a little bit more detailed. So the two classes that I'm recording these videos, and I've been teaching these live classes as well. First one is on objects, and that's what we're doing today, where I'm going to show you a go-to method of sketching the area around your subject to make it have interest. And the reason I say that is because sometimes you want to, draw something, that's just around. Like, here's my coffee cup, right? Maybe I just want to draw that. But a cup by itself without some type of background, it lacks a lot. And so when I teach drawing, I like to start not with how to draw the coffee cup, but with a composition. How to set that object in a, with some air around it, or with a background or something going on. I mean, it doesn't have to be finished off in a little rectangle or whatever. It can, but I just think it's nice if you start automatically drawing with the idea that you can just drop out the background that's back there, like the messy table I have over here with all my art supplies on it, and just draw this cup, but give it a nice little environment. And then from that, I can change that environment, or I can darken it or lighten it, or add texture or add pattern or whatever. And it starts to become something different, something of its own. That is just, a very simple sort of explanation. But the next thing that is useful to try, and this is really a technique that I think it's so valuable for artists to understand how to use, whether you're drawing or whether you're painting, and that is practice using lost edges. So while you're busy experimenting, why not include, pushing some of those darks or pushing some of those lights in your subject a little bit further than you normally would? And that is the concept of lost edges, where, for example, the shadow side of a dark object, maybe it has a dark background, it just sort of disappears. We humans know that there's an edge there, but we don't have to actually draw a line. And so we're going to talk a little bit about lost edges. And then there's exaggeration and how it can help your art. What is it that is interesting about what you're looking at, and how can you point that out to people? I mean, this is a visual communication. You, the artist, are saying, I thought this bit was really interesting. Look here. So exaggeration can help that. And then there's abstraction. And so we tend to think of abstraction as kind of like, the throwing the paint around kind of abstraction. And that is a lot of fun. And there's certainly room for it. But there's also the idea of abstracting something, of pulling out the essence and then maybe playing around with that idea a little bit. So we're going to talk about that. And then the next class, the great outdoors, we've got some more things to talk about. How to figure out what really interested you, not losing sight of that. Moving away from photography as you develop your work. Once again, exaggeration. The idea of using, masses to represent different areas and help you break down how experiment a little bit with how your drawing could go differently from drawing every single little thing that you see out there in the scene. And then also, once again, creating abstract art, starting from sketches. What is the goal behind your work? So that'll be the second video. The big question we're trying to answer really is, what moves you to create? What was it that made you decide you were going to draw this thing rather than that thing? So I heard this really great quotation the other day, and I just wanted to share it because I think it's so true. Learn your technique to express your art. Don't just paint to express your technique. Now, this is really important because I think a lot of us, when we get started doing art, we really, really want to learn good technique. That is really what we're after. Maybe it's realism, maybe it's, impressionist watercolor, whatever it happens to be. And it can be almost not a trap, but sort of a corner, like a wedge that we drive ourselves into when we concentrate too much on technique. I mean, once you've learned that technique, the idea is to then use that to express yourself, not just to continue to show how good you are technically. And I think experimenting gets you away from that problem. It's a way to get out of that corner. And we also hear a lot the phrase, it's how you make your art, not what you paint or draw, that will make your art distinctive. And this is really true. But some people interpret it's how you make your art to be that technique, to be technique, when it really means having confidence in your own take on the idea. It's how you draw, which is different from how, Jennifer over there or John over there draws. And to be okay with that, you don't have to worry about Jennifer and John. You just worry about yourself and you try to make your art be as true to you as possible. And then you can paint whatever. You can paint coffee cups or you can paint the Empire State Building. It doesn't matter because it will be your expression. So I think that's just something important to keep in mind as we're going along and we're doing art. Okay, a few bits of, I guess, vocabulary that I use a lot when I talk about art. So if you haven't been through my art classes on YouTube or whatever, let me just run through these really quickly. So the top, a value scale. When I talk about value, light value, medium value, dark value, this is what I'm talking about. Is it light? Is it medium? Is it dark? So that's what a value scale is. And then I use the word, sometimes you'll hear me say notan. So a notan, it's a Japanese word, and it talks about the balance of light and dark. So I had mentioned that I like to start, when I teach people, start with composition rather than start with how to draw the cup, how to draw the sphere or whatever. Because I really think that if you can get a sense of what a nice balanced dark and light composition is, for example, and then you learn how to draw the tree and the building and the stuff that goes in it, but you're always working with a composition that it has a nice balance to it. I think it feels more fulfilling. I think it feels like you're getting somewhere a lot faster rather than learning how to draw each individual thing that goes into the scene and then trying to put it together later. Why not just start with a composition from the beginning and then learn how to make the stuff in it look right? So that's just my personal way of going about it. And when I talk about composition, I'm talking about arrangement of objects, things, items in the scenery, whatever it happens to be. And this is, I thought, kind of an interesting layout here because you can either, if you're not really sure if something is a good composition, well, you can zoom out, you can have it balanced in the middle, you can break the objects up and have them overlap in different ways. Composition really, people like to make rules about everything and say you should follow this rule or that rule. I say do whatever it is that you want to do. If it turns out to have been a bad decision, you'll figure that out sooner or later. But why not try, right? It's experimenting. So these are some ideas of how composition can work, for example, for a still life, or it could be a round tree, a church steeple, and a square building, either way. But feel free to try whatever it is that you think is going to be interesting. So let's start talking now about what we're going to do for the drawing exercise today in experimentation. So the very first thing I want to talk about is how to put an object kind of in a composition, in an environment to get you starting to play with things. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is if you've got a random object, and say if I'm looking over here at my coffee cup and I've got all this other junk around there, but I don't want to draw the other junk. I just want to draw the coffee cup. There's something I like about it. But it has coffee in it. That's really it. But a nice technique, and very easy to do, is very simple. Just put where the light area is. Of course, we've got light shining from one side and it's casting a shadow. That means one side of the object is darker than the other. Just put a little bit of darkness behind where the lit part is and put some light near where the darker areas are. Now, in this particular case, this is also casting a shadow. So you've got a third place where you can show a shadow. But all of a sudden, otherwise it would look what? Like, just like a shaded circle or sphere hanging out there. There's no sense of environment around it. So the very first thing, whether or not your photograph or your real object looks like that, you can just do it anyway. And so what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this ceramic mask here. And we're going to try to do some of the same things. So you notice on the ceramic mask, kind of like on the bowl or like on a coffee cup, it's lit from the top to begin with. You can tell that because you can see the shadow under the lips, under the nose, under the top of the eyes. The headdress is making some shadow. So you can tell it's lit from the top and has some darks at the bottom. So the very first thing I know I can do is potentially put some darks, behind the top of the head and maybe some light somewhere else. So let's sort of see how that might look. So for this exercise, by the way, I have turned everything into black and white pictures because when you're starting off with this, I think it's just easier to remove the color. After a while, you'll get used to drawing colored things and making them black and white. But I think it's, to start off with is kind of interesting. So I wanted to show you the mask first on a white background. Okay, it's a lovely mask, but that's kind of dull. What happens if we put a totally black background behind it? All right, now that has a little bit more zing to it, right? It's pulling out some of the darks. It makes the lights look even lighter. That's interesting, but we don't always want to put a big black block behind everything. That is not interesting. All right, so now we've got this really great example by this artist, Hilberry, who did this. Now, this is a very detailed, this is not what we're going to be doing. This is very detailed and would have taken a long time, but a really good example of using the dark behind the light. Who knows what was really back there in this artist's studio? It could have been a blank wall. You can see that you can't really see where the table goes. That's a nice lost edge, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It could have been wallpaper. There could have been chairs and sweatshirts back there. We don't know because this artist eliminated that, started with this. Now we're concentrating on the subject, and you could take it from there. You could do something else. You could add a different wallpaper and you could do whatever you wanted to. So like I said, we wouldn't be drawing something of this nature just in the experimenting stage, but this is a really good example of that. Dark behind light, light behind dark. Now you're starting to get a sense of atmosphere around whatever it is you're drawing. So one thing that we're trying to do, in a sense, is we're trying to become John Singer Sargent. And so Sargent used this technique a lot. He got really tired at some particular point of doing large paintings of celebrities and very important, well-off people. And he wanted to concentrate on his landscape, paintings and drawings, that sort of thing. But he would still do these charcoal drawings of people for whatever reason, for commissions or otherwise. And he loved that technique of the dark behind the light. And if you look at these faces, notice that where he wants you to really look, on the face, it's very lit, and there's some heavy darkness behind there. So we get that sense of the contrast is really wonderful. And then where he's got it a little bit lighter, sometimes he's got it just sort of fading off into light. Sometimes he's still got contrast going on there. So you've got the light skin with the dark behind it. Then you've got the dark of the hair with the light behind it. You've got this contrast going on. So who knows what was behind these people when they were sitting there? But because he's thrown a little bit of background, our eye normally goes very, very quickly to wherever we see high contrast. It's just what we do as humans. And so an artist can take advantage of that. And your very first stop basically on sketching, as you're thinking about, what are you going to do with this particular thing that you're drawing, is to throw that little bit of background around and see what happens. So that's the first technique to try, is just the idea of drawing this mask and adding some background to it, adding a little bit dark behind the light and light behind the dark and see what that looks like. And I'll show you at the end sort of, I did these exercises myself. I'll show you kind of how mine turned out so you can kind of get an idea. But the second thing to incorporate is the idea of lost edges. And I alluded to that a few minutes ago. So here we have on the left-hand side, we've got the mask with the black background. Interesting, yes, but even more interesting when we start darkening some of the dark areas and letting them sort of slide into the dark background. All of a sudden, the mask is a little bit more mysterious. And so here is another interesting example. Once again, John Singer Sargent, but you see how he's got the top of her head, it just sort of disappears into that background. So he's thrown a little background back there, just as sort of we're suggesting, and now he's losing some edges. So not only do you have the contrast going on, but you also have this a little bit more feeling of form. And you can really see that here. So in this particular case, this woman she's leaning back in her pillows. Doesn't that look comfortable? and her hair just sort of goes back into the darkness, and her hair goes back into the shadow that she's making on the pillow. It's beautifully done because we as humans know what's going on. We know that there's an edge there to her hair, but it just gives so much dimension, and it gives her this feeling of going back. So we don't know what Sargent was actually seeing there, do we? We haven't a clue. So he was manipulating the space by just sort of adding some stuff and seeing what happened, being a little experimental with his charcoal, in a way that we can do very easily. This is not a difficult thing to do. It's just a matter of practicing it and seeing how it works out for you. So you can also have lost edges that go towards the light. So we've been talking about how the dark, disappears into the dark. But you can also, this sketch here, the artist with the back buildings and then, the trees in the background, that's very light, very indistinct. And so that means your eye is drawn to what's going up at the front. Where the dark is, where the detail, that's where you tend to look. And the stuff that's lighter, the building in the background, the back of the one building, those, it sort of recedes, doesn't it? So when you have something in front of you, whether a scene or an object or whatever, you don't have to recreate it exactly. There is no, drawing police person who's going to come and say, oh, you didn't do that right. Look at, that isn't how it goes. We as artists are able to manipulate reality any way that we want to. It is our choice how we do it. And experimenting is part of us taking control of that and saying, yeah, I'm going to draw this way. And in my version of reality, that stuff can be light because I want, this to happen. I'm just interested to see what does happen. What happens if I make that background light? So one of the things I'd like to bring up at this particular point is I showed you this little eraser earlier on, the kneaded rubber eraser. And I want you to think of that as a tool to be used, that, you can draw stuff out and then you can come back in and erase a bit out, lighten things here and there and look and see what does that do? What's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? Is you have to draw it back in again. And that's why rough sketches are wonderful because there's no risk. You're not, it's a few minutes of your time. Some people are afraid to erase because they're afraid they're not going to get it right again. But, what the heck? At some point, you're going to have to do that. Occasionally destroy things in your art to try to make them better. And it's much easier to practice that when you're dealing with sketches. So once again, lost edges, when you have these little sketches of the mask that you do, you put some dark and light around the edges, then have some of those dark areas, maybe enhance the darks a little bit, just as here, and let them slide off into the other dark areas. And likewise, you don't have to bring the dark all the way around the top. Maybe the lit part at the top of the mask can just slide off into a light area, just sort of erase back there and see what that looks like. So, exaggeration and addition. This is really important. So I'm going to use the other mask as an example here just because I like this mask. Isn't that really great? That's a Japanese mask. It's wonderful. So I loved this mask by itself. I'd be happy just to draw it like it was, but I was, Once again, you don't want to just sit down and be a copier. You're not a big human color copier or black and white copier. You want to sort of add your own take in. So first of all, I thought to myself, well, what does this look like with a dark background? And I could have done this in pen. I did this, in Photoshop, but I could have done it in pencil. Just filled in the eyes, made them dark, maybe it made a dark edge around it to see what it would look like. And it's a little bit more menacing. And I thought, well, gosh, that's interesting. What if I try to make it, do something that's a drawing that does look menacing, but not just a big black block? So the first thing that I did was I said, well, what if I tried that, dark behind light, light behind dark thing. And then as I was doing it, I got a little carried away and I was doing a little bit more dark. And as I did, I go, gosh, this looks sort of like a wraith or something, like a ghost or something like that with this mask on. What happens if I do even more of that? What happens then? And so then I got to this, this really to me looked like, like a spirit form with the mask on. And all I had really done was just add some more dark around the back, So here's taking a basic mask. You can see it over here on the left with just a white background. And then by just adding some stuff, all of a sudden, I'm on the road to trying something very different. And I could, take it on from there, maybe erase some things out, maybe add some even more background, maybe add some more stuff behind there, make a story that went along with it. So this is something just for you to try and mess around with. This is what I mean by you can take small steps, go from one to the next and see what happens. There is a very good chance that it'll all kind of go south along the way and you'll end up going, wow, I wish why isn't there Control Z on my drawing like there is on the computer that allows me to go backwards? But that's why you try again. You go, okay, where I got to before was kind of cool. And the next time you do it, you'll be even better at it and you'll get there faster and then you'll try a different experiment. So abstraction, I wanted to just sort of talk about that today. Abstraction can mean, it can mean the throwing the paint around type of stuff, which, is fun, but it can also mean the art of, the art is the method of communicating an idea. So it's the idea, in other words, that's important rather than the object. The entire object doesn't even have to be drawn, or it can be drawn differently to suit the idea. So sketching these ideas and trying them as drawings are a great way to explore ideas. What I did here, for example, was I was thinking about, an ancient mask like that. Do we uncover it out of the sand? Is it like maybe as a mask, as a representation of a person who is not here, so they're partly in the spirit world, or maybe it's the idea that a mask covers up, that we can't see the real person. So, what we're seeing is only a sense of a form. And so we don't need to see the entire mask. We can just see part of it. So, I'm just rambling here. But you understand what I mean, that the object can actually be used to convey an idea and not just be a drawing of an object. And one of the ways you can do that is sketch things out and erase things, add to them, exaggerate, add some background or just, play around with how you're going to go ahead and draw it. And then when you get to the point that you do want to do a larger finished drawing or a painting, your idea is now based on your drawing. So you can still use the photographic reference and everything like that, but now you're looking back at your drawing, which was a way to get what was in your brain out through your hand, so that you don't just copy what you see on your phone or what you see on your screen. This is what I'm adamant about, is all of that reference is wonderful, but it is to support your creative idea. And how to get more creative is just to mess about like this, but sometimes in logical steps. So abstraction can also deviate completely from any form of representation and still embody the artist's idea. So maybe the idea of a mask, right? Which often includes, eye openings, nose opening, mouth opening, and sort of like a rigid form. What if you took those elements and just placed them in different places on your drawing or canvas, in a sense, still being a mask, but playing around differently? What if you just thought about the idea of mask and drew shapes that made you think that were mask-like shapes, getting more and more abstract, more and more away from representation. So you can go as far as you want to with that. There's a painting that I did in this show called Tangle, and it is probably one of the more abstract paintings that I did. It's quite big, and the whole time I worked on it, I was adding more and more paint, doing more and more things, and I just kept thinking of the word tangle. Tangle. What does a tangle look like? What does a tangle feel like? What happens when there is a tangle? Like, what are the forms that are being made? And so I got there to that point because I had done a little sketch up front where I started exploring that idea, started exploring that thought about tangle and what would a tangle look like and how would that actually work. And then when I got to the paint part, I tried, how does it work in paint? How do I make a tangle? And so this is sort of where I want you guys to to use it, like I said, a springboard, a jumping off point. You probably will develop your own ways to go about doing experimentation. But if you ever get stuck, you can just start here. So to get to the concept, drawing and sketching are great ways to experiment or to plan how you're going to proceed with a more complete drawing or painting. I'm sure that by now you can see what I'm talking about. That you can do some very basic things to jumpstart you on a process whereby you end up with something that is very distinctive and your own. And the 4 methods that I'm suggesting just to start with, if you're not quite sure and just, how do I even get going? This idea, if you're drawing objects, still life, individual objects, whatever it happens to be, even people, dark behind light, light behind dark. It's just a great way to start to get a feeling of a background. And then lost edges. Once your object starts interacting with its environment, basically, light areas sort of bleeding into light areas, dark areas bleeding into dark areas. You don't want to do this all over the whole thing and look crazy, but here and there to sort of emphasize whatever you want, something disappearing into the distance, or you want emphasis on the light part so the dark part all kind of fades away. These things are on that road to experimentation, as are exaggerating things, exaggerating features or contrast, or making additions or subtractions so you can get a more interesting result. Really easy to do with a pencil and an eraser. And then, of course, practice adding abstraction into your sketching. So I promised you at the end that I would show you, using, I've taken the exercise sheet with the 4 heads, and I'm just about to post what I ended up doing with that, just to sort of give you an idea. Just a few minutes on each one. You don't have to take a long time, but it starts getting you warmed up, gives you an idea of how to go forth. Okay, and if there's anyone who would like to get in touch with me, talk about art, or if they've got a question about what they've been seeing, these are some of the ways you can get in touch with me. On my website, there's an art classes page, and there's a PDF of every single one of the classes, all the videos that are on the YouTube channel, including these exercises from today and all the slides that we've just had a look at. I just hope you have a lot of fun and that you start to incorporate drawing in your artistic practice in order to do some experimenting. Good luck. See you soon.